Thank you so much for coming to tonight's program featuring Sam Wasson and Graham Moore. I'm Andrea Grossman, the founder of Writer's Block, now in its 28th season. Thank you. Before I get to tonight's program, I want to thank the Abel for making this absolutely beautiful room available to us tonight. I think its historic elegance would fit nicely into a Francis Coppola movie. The Abel is a community, an organization built by and for women 130 years ago. It's committed to enriching our lives with education, the arts, culture, and more. And they're so ever good to Writer's Block and to me. The Abel is a membership organization, and they welcome you to join. So, now for tonight. If you're interested in contemporary film in general, and Francis Coppola specifically, this book, The Path to Paradise, will dazzle you. It takes off at 100 miles an hour and doesn't stop. Sam Wasson, a deeply respected film historian, manages to maintain the mystery of who Coppola is, while telling us so much more about how he operates on any number of levels, how he thinks, and what his ultimate vision might be. What I love is how Sam deconstructs Coppola's big picture into bites that ordinary mortals can fathom. Coppola is a visionary, a dreamer, and a builder of ideas. And in Sam's loving hands, he emerges as one of the most interesting and confounding artists I've ever read about. More than once, I said to myself, Francis, can we discuss this? Or that decision with a trusted advisor? Have you never heard of a lawyer? Have you never heard of From winemaking to resorts to Coppola's staggering achievements with his many masterpieces, Sam offers us a most dynamic portrait of an artist who relays to us a regret or two and who has finally tackled the dream project he's wanted to create for 40 years. So Sam is not the only good writer up here tonight. We're in good company with Graham Moore. Graham knows his way around novels and screenplays, having amassed boatloads of wins and nominations for his novel, The Sherlockian, for which he also wrote the screenplay, racking up more nominations. His acclaimed screenplay, The Imitation Game, won a slew of awards, including the Academy Award, Writers Guild Award, Penn Center Award, and BAFTA for Best Adapted Screenplay. There are so many awards. He is also the author of the thriller based on, gotta say it, strong currents within the electricity wars between Thomas Edison and Westinghouse. He's coming out with a new thriller that covers the home front during World War II with a dashing economist. So here's what's going to happen tonight. Sam and Graham will chat about the giant who is Coppola. After they're through, we'll have time for some questions. I'll walk around with a mic, and you'll please stand up when you get the mic for your questions. Afterwards, Sam will sign copies of his terrific book, The Path to Paradise. What day are we at? We're at Hanukkah, people. We're at Christmas. It's the holidays. It's time to buy presents. So they're all out in the foyer tonight, and Sam will sign all of them. Thank you. It's a wonderful book for anyone who loves the movies. So, Sam and Graham.
I just want to see who's not here. Hi. Hi, everybody.
No, please, welcome your adoring fans.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi. Hi, Anne. Oh, my God.
Hi, Sam's adoring fans. I'm happy to be among you tonight. And now I'm going to ask you some questions about this wonderful book. I think the first thing I wanted to start with is to say that, Sam, you are our great chronicler of film history. You've now written this magnificent book about Francis Ford Coppola. And tonight, I feel like I want to use a few minutes here to sort of turn the tables a little bit and I'm going to be the Sam Wasson to your Coppola. And I want to ask about your process and your method. Tell me where the idea for the book first came from.
I don't remember where it first came from, but I know that I was dissatisfied with the other books on Coppola because they were all about Coppola, the director of The Godfather, which is true. He did direct The Godfather, but it's not.
He did?
He did.
It wasn't somebody. Oh, yeah, definitely.
No, it was definitely
You're sure?
him. I'm
You
sure.
looked into it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm sure. And but it's not the deepest part of him. The Godfather, as most of us know, or maybe we know, it was a great accident. It was never anything Francis wanted to do. He did it because he needed the money to support Zoetrope. And I knew I'd always known that. So why wasn't Zoetrope the center of the story of Francis Ford Coppola? And that's what I set out to do. And also, I was a fan. If you could ever be this is a good audience to say this. I'm a fan of the production company Zoetrope. I'm actually a fan of a production company. And it's because it's not just because of the movies that Zoetrope has made, but the way they make movies. And I wanted to write about the spiritual adventure of making movies the Zoetrope way.
So what was then your first step? You decide you want to write a book about Zoetrope, about Coppola founding Zoetrope, about its history. Did you reach out to him early in the process? Did you reach out to him late in the process? What was step one?
I reached out to my editor, Noah Eaker, who said yes right away. He said yes before I even had Coppola, which tells you how cool Noah is. And then I immediately went to Coppola, and he said, absolutely not. And I said...
so did you email him? Did you get a phone number? Set the scene.
How did I get to him? Agents. Always
That's the move.
Always wrong. But I had no other way, because very few people know Francis in LA because he's not here. He's very much there. So amongst all the people I knew, everyone said, well, no, I don't really know Francis. So I had to go through the agents, and then I got to Francis, and he said, I've told my story. I don't really want to tell it again. And I said, Francis, you haven't really told your story. This is the real story. And he said, no, I'm on the record. I don't need to do it. So I said, well, then I won't do the book. And
did you have a moment where you thought you might not do the book?
Well, I didn't for years. Didn't do it because Francis said no, and I thought, oh, I can't do it without Francis. And then years went by, and it didn't leave me, and I thought, I really want to do this. And so I did it anyway. I did it anyway. And then, through a mutual friend, Francis said, I heard you're doing a good job. I would be willing to talk to you. And I said, oh, okay. and that began a wild ride.
So did you go up there?
Yes, I went up there, and he just said, he just said, have at it. And they brought out they brought out files for me based on what they thought I would be interested in. And then they said, and here's the key to the storage facility in case there's anything else. And I said, okay. And so I took the key and I went to the storage facility, which is 4 times the size of this room. And piled high with storage boxes. On each box is the name of a movie. So there are walls of apocalypse, and it's if you can imagine wanting to live and wanting to kill yourself at the same moment. I have to live, but I have to die simultaneously. That's the feeling. I'm never gonna, and that's what happened. And so I was truly let loose in the Citizen Kane of storage rooms and found stuff that I didn't know if I was supposed to even see. Because I don't even know if he knew. Is this being recorded? It is.
So, but he has an archival staff that helps maintain these things. Who's
Very good, Graham.
nameless?
Yes, no, he does have an archival staff, and I did find things that I didn't know if I was supposed to find. And Francis, to his great credit, pushed back on a lot, and we fought. And he always said, "It's your," he always said, "It's your call." He would fight.
That's amazing.
And he would say, you need context for this. They're not going to understand if you don't explain. So you must explain this. And I would say, okay, I'll explain it. But at no point did he ever say, absolutely not. He was incredible in that way.
That's so remarkable, because it seems like some of the quotes you have from him in the book too, he's pretty self-reflective at times. I mean, he seems to have a good, you can tell me how reliable a narrator of his own life he is, but he seems quite sort of reflective and often humble about admitting his own mistakes when he's made them, taking credit certainly for the successes, but he didn't seem shy in the quotes that you have in the book at all about owning up to whatever missteps he may have made along the way. Is that how you found him in interviews as well?
He's very practiced as an interviewer, so as interviewee. So he knows how to do that. And also, Francis is a collaborator. He genuinely wants to distribute the credit, and it was very important to him that I spread the credit around, and he would correct me oftentimes and say, that wasn't me, it was so-and-so, it was so-and-so, and I would say, Francis, it's not really relevant to the story, and he would say, well, I want them to have credit, and I'd say, Francis, that's your book, that's not, you should do that book, but it's not for this story to go to the third AD to talk about, you know what I mean. So, but that's the kind of guy that he is that he really for Francis that's the most important thing is community. It's more important. I'm looking at Anne because I know she knows, but it's more important than the work, I would say, is what it took to get there. And that's what Francis loves even more than movies. And I think this is what people have gotten wrong about him biographically, is that he's not a director first. And he would say that himself in a different way. He would say, I'm not a natural. And he says in the book, he says, Spielberg is a natural, Scorsese's a natural, Polanski's a natural, which is true. Those guys are born filmmakers. Francis is not a born filmmaker. What he is born to do is bring people together. And that's what a movie is. And that's what a restaurant is. And that's what a hotel is. And that's what a family is. And all the things that Francis is famous for outside of movies. And zoetrope is a mechanism that brings people together. What happens on screen is almost an artifact of the happening of a Coppola community. And that's I don't want to say that's the artwork because that denigrates the great art that we know of, but that's what's most important to him, the experience of making the thing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You have, there's a quote in the book where you quote one of his collaborators as saying something like, I'm going to mingle it, so correct me if I get this wrong. But you quote one of Coppola's many illustrious collaborators saying something like, Francis is the greatest sort of bringer together of celebrities and artists and people of great talent in the world.
Yes.
And it really, one gets the impression from the book that is certainly the case. I mean, you certainly just look at the caliber of talent that he's able to sort of recruit from the very beginning to work with him. What do you think that ability is that he has? How is he so good at being able to...
Enthusiasm. Francis has enthusiasm. he also is a leader. He's not afraid to say, I'm not going to wait for this. Francis does not wait for the studio to say yes. Francis says, start making the movie, and then they'll be afraid that they're going to miss out. Which is true, which is how he did The Rain People. I'm going to look over here, too. Which is how he did The Rain People. He just starts going. And if they come aboard, they come aboard. If they don't, he'll find a way to do it. So it's enthusiasm and it's conviction, even more so than creativity or the script. It's really producer's characteristics that Francis has. It's really, this book is Francis the producer, is what this book is in a big way, that's, I think, his greatest skill.
It's pretty remarkable, to hear you describe that he seems to give, the impression I get from the book is that he gives his collaborators a lot of latitude.
Yeah.
He gives the actors a ton of space to improvise, to do their own work through a lengthy rehearsal process. He gives Walter Murch in post a ton of runway to experiment with stuff and invent original technology. That it feels as producerial as it does. If what we mean by directing is you stand over there and do this thing, he does very little of that.
He does very little of it. Francis is on a mission to find out, which is very expensive. Which does not make Bob Evans happy, and it does not make John Calley happy, and it does not make, it takes, Fred Roos knows how to do that, but this is not the way that we make movies, for very good reason. I mean, Apocalypse Now, famously, is not a good way to make a movie. But you have an experience of a lifetime.
And it seems to work out, right? I mean,
it has.
It worked out there.
It worked out there.
There's a bit, you talk about this in the book, where you talk about how for him, I found this quite meaningful when you talked about how for Coppola, it seemed that the process of making a film had to sort of fundamentally reflect its content. Yes. That it seemed as if his process would sort of whirl around.
Yes.
Can you talk to me about that and where you think that came from?
Yes, that's the center of this. Francis wants to live the movie while he's making it. He wants everybody to live the movie while they're making it. He's a method director.
That's such a lovely phrase. You should put that in the book next draft.
Thank you. That's what he does. So he's always rewriting the script. He's never sure he's got it because he's experiencing it. He doesn't know if it's right. He makes Apocalypse, and so he's got to experience what evil is in his heart. He has got to go crazy to make this movie. He has got to do it. And Hearts of Darkness, we all know, is one of the great movies about a movie ever, and Eleanor's book notes, too, about the making of Apocalypse Now are unbelievable. The piece that I wanted to add to that was that this is not an aberration. This is the way Francis works. He needs to live the movie. And he needed to know evil while he needed to know madness. And to do now, not all of this is conscious. Some of it is conscious. Francis does say, when he went to Cannes with the movie, he said, I made Vietnam to film Vietnam, or something like that. It wasn't a movie about Vietnam, it was Vietnam, And some people think, well, he's being a salesman, but no, he needed. You're seeing, he needed to know what that was, and to do that as a writer, as a painter, as a sculptor, to do that when you're alone with the work is one thing, but to do that when you're making a movie and you have to deal with the external world and millions of unknowns and millions of dollars. I don't know another filmmaker who can afford to do that emotionally or financially the way Francis has done it, and I'm in awe of that.
Yeah, certainly the ability to genuinely not care about spending other people's money.
Or his own.
Or his own.
Or his
yeah.
own.
I mean, he puts literally his money where his mouth is.
Yeah.
Time and time again in the course of this story.
And well, it's so inspirational. It's so inspirational that part of this story. Spend your money.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, it felt to me, I will honestly tell you that when I finished it, my big creative takeaway from it was that one should take bigger risks.
Yeah,
That's
good.
what I told myself that night.
Good.
Did you feel the same takeaway as you were writing it?
Yes. I reminded, and Francis and I talked about this. I quoted to him Elaine May, who said, "The only safe thing is to take a risk." And Francis absolutely believes that. You know, he says, why do I care? I lose all my money, I lose my house, I'll get a job. And in fact, he did for 10 years, got a job. But without him taking those risks, he wouldn't have what he made.
Yeah, it's a remarkable sense of self, sense of sort of, this is what I want to do, and this is what it's going to take to do it, and I'm just going to do it, and whoever's coming along with me, great. Do you feel like his process of living the story to be able to make the film about it rubbed off on you? Like, do you feel that you had to be Francis to write about Francis?
Yes.
How'd that go?
Yes.
Do you need a loan? Like, what's your...
No, it went great. It went great. It went great because writing about Francis gave me faith. It gave me
Tell me about
sense,
that. That's really interesting.
It gave me a spiritual sense writing about Francis that I didn't have before. And in fact, that's why I picked to do this book now. Because the last book I wrote about Chinatown was very depressing. And it was about Chinatown. And it was about the end of the movie business. And it was very depressing for me writing it. And I picked Francis to do after that for the same reason Francis picked One from the Heart to follow Apocalypse, which was I've been through, not comparing myself.
But I can compare you to Francis Ford Coppola, so it felt like having composed a masterpiece like The Big Goodbye, Sammy's amazing book.
I'm saying you go through a dark period creatively. You want to go through an up period after that because you're so convinced of the reality of the darkness after you live in that you want to see, well, is there reality in the light? And I went from, as I told my current psychiatrist, I went from Freud to Jung in the course of these two books. That Chinatown was a very Freudian book, which is we're all stuck repeating the past, and we're on that loop, and we're never gonna get out of it. And Jung, who's Francis is a Jungian, and brings you out of that. So yes, I did live it. I did live it.
That's such a beautiful story to have gone through. Yeah,
it's true. I did. Yeah, I lived it. Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about that comparison actually, but the comparison between Chinatown and this period of work of Coppola's. Something I got from The Big Goodbye, your wonderful book about Chinatown, was it felt to me like that was, how shall I put this, the bleakest film made under a Hollywood system.
Yeah.
And Apocalypse seems to be, in some ways, the birth of modern independent cinema as we know it. It just happens to be extremely expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Like the thing that makes it independent is not actually the budget level. It's the fact that they're just on their own. I mean, even the sort of
But they were United Artists. May God bless United Artists. You know, there was such a thing. Someone's applauding?
we have a studio fan in the house.
You
not
know,
only the fans of
United
production
Artists
companies.
should have big fans. I mean, these guys were the greatest, you know? They were the greatest. I wish I met, I mean, Francis said to me the greatest executive he ever met was Ben Benjamin, who ran United Artists. But all those guys had a great time. Marcia Nassiter, Plesko, and Medavoy, and Stephen Bach, and that was the real deal, what they were doing. You know, that was the real deal. But it's independent-ish. It's independent-ish. Because,
Well, and
yeah.
he seemed to have, to tell me if your impression of this is different. The impression I got from your book is that he seemed to have a real love-hate relationship with Hollywood and with the studios. Even the idea of building Zoetrope in the Bay Area rather than Los Angeles seemed a part of this. I'm going to stand apart from you. I don't want a studio deal. He had tried that with his Warner Brothers deal, was dissatisfied with the results. He wanted to be apart from the studio mechanism in some way.
Yeah.
Do you think that's accurate?
Well, these guys, they grew up watching the movie. They grew up in the 50s when the studio system was falling apart, and a lot of art, and I'm putting big air quotes around that, huge. A lot of art cinema was coming out of Europe, and so they thought
Those are contemptuous quotes for anyone
Yeah.
who couldn't quite read that from his, yeah.
You know, and if this is still with us, by the way, that people think, oh, if it has subtitles, it's art, but if Hollywood makes it, it's garbage, you know, this kind of thing. But they grew up in that world, so they were sort of born angry at Hollywood, and always looked at it as, you know, this corporate monster, which it is now, and then it was just starting to be, you know, that was a golden age compared to now. But so Francis thought, well, I'm going to go out on my own and start again. Even though the kernel of it is kind of wrong, that Hollywood in the 60s was bad, it wasn't, not to the degree it is now, that he thought we have to go and reinvent the system, which is always a healthy impulse, even when it's misguided. The idea that you are going to do it your way is a good one.
I was actually looking for my notes on this because
Did that answer the?
It did answer
I
the
don't know if
question.
it did.
And what's interesting to me is that I don't know. Do we all think that we just missed a golden age? Like, did he seem to really feel that the Hollywood system had gotten too corporate and too money obsessed and too success obsessed? Like all the complaints that one might lob at studio filmmaking today, it felt like Coppola and his peers were lobbing against the system at the time, which now we look at as, oh my gosh.
As a golden age. Well, both are true, because in fact it was the studio system crested in 1946, and so anyone after that has reason to complain, and those who get farther away from that have more reason to complain. So both are true. Francis was right that the system he was in was worse than it was before, and we have right to complain that the system is worse than it was when Francis was complaining. You see, it's what we call a downward slope.
I see why you picked up a new therapist over the course of this.
Yeah. He wanted to make a new Hollywood, but what he had in mind was about more than just the movies. It was a way to live and work together. In fact, it was a plan for utopia. And that's why the book is The Path to Paradise. Because making a movie when it's good is a little world, a little petri dish, of a little Noah's Ark of what the world could be when it's good. You've got expertise in all fields. You've got actors, writers, directors, sound people, salespeople. You've got business people. You've got virtually every strength that a person could have is consolidated right here. And why can't we multiply this to the size of a studio? And why can't we multiply that studio to the size of a city? And why can't we grow this idea of making a movie to a better world? And that's Francis's project.
It's such a beautiful notion. It feels, from the way you describe it, both tonight and in the pages of the book, that Francis really loves directing. Like, he loves the actual process of making films, which I think I have certainly got the impression is not the case for all filmmakers.
Well, how is it for you?
Yeah, we're not going to talk about my films tonight because we're talking about Francis Ford Coppola's films in your books. But I've certainly had the experience of being on a set for the first time and being terribly afraid that I was going to hate it. I mean, like, I've spent so much time trying to be able to do this with my life, and then it's one thing to be some kid and say, when I grow up, I'm going to hold a camera and tell someone where to stand. Gosh, that's going to be amazing. And then you do it, and you finally get to do it for the first time, and you're sort of going, oh man, I hope I love this, because if I don't, I've spent 10 years talking myself into a nightmare. And I was quite happy to discover that I really did love it. But I've certainly met filmmakers who, you get the impression they like having made films, but they don't actually love the process.
I know a lot of filmmakers like that. Yeah.
And he seems, he would never finish the film and send it off to be distributed if he could help it.
Well, Francis still hasn't finished the film. He keeps recutting Apocalypse and Godfather, and he's now recutting One from the Heart. For him, it's always process.
Yeah, where do you think that comes from? That idea of we're just going to keep going back into these films?
I think it comes from the child who had polio and wanted to play and never got and looked out his window and said, I want to be with the kids. I know this is true. Francis is astute enough to actually answer this question with authority and say, yes, this is exactly where it came from. To quote Francis, I wanted to be part of the group. Francis was never part of the group growing up. He thought he had he does have big lips. Francis was self-conscious about his lips. He had big ears. He was overweight. He had polio. He was afraid of girls. He was afraid of his parents. He idolized his older brother, who was great looking and brilliant. I mean, what a nightmare. And Francis's little sister was adorable and a ballerina. So Francis was, in his heart, the ugly duckling. And when he got polio, he spent so much time in bed. This is how you make an artist, by the way. Parents, don't do this to your children.
Inattentive parents and life-threatening illness.
Yes,
that's okay.
Correct. Yes, the perception of isolation, whether you are actually isolated or not, I see this in every filmmaker that I write about. It's the perception of isolation. And once you perceive yourself as isolated, you go into an imaginary space. And that imaginary space is the beginning of your creativity. And the vision of yourself as an isolated person never leaves you. Now, if you as a filmmaker start to integrate into society, watch out. You're toast. You have to stay.
Why?
Because then you lose the need to imagine. You there has to be some life or death, psychological life or death threat that forces you into an imaginary space to really commit to this fantasy of creativity. As soon as you could, this happened to Mike Nichols. You know, he hit the penthouse, literally, and he was like, I'm going to dinner. And same with Woody, you know, too. You know, and once you integrate socially, once you become a healthy person, is what I'm saying. You know, it can be traumatizing. It can be bad for the work.
What a double-edged sword! Yeah.
Are they still with me? Us.
Do you, Sam Wasson, as a well-adjusted member of society?
Yeah.
How are you still able to produce such wonderful?
I'm faking it right now. I'm absolutely faking it. Yeah.
It's interesting that it's the perception of isolation that you describe, not necessarily any specific condition of isolation itself. Because certainly when I think of the things that isolated Polanski as a child and a young man are quite different from the things that isolated Francis.
Definitely. So, but that's what I went a long way around the question, and that is, Francis wanted to be a part of the group. That's why he made movies.
It's interesting then that psychologically he becomes such a great leader of teams, because you often don't get. I feel like we see this with other filmmakers where you're either a great captain or you're a sociopathic weirdo who's good at special effects.
Or both.
Yeah. Well, but they tend often not to quite...
They don't?
I feel like the sociopathic weirdos, perhaps my favorite filmmakers...
Mine too.
Are not known for, you know, their wine and dining prowess.
Well, Francis is not a filmmaker first. You know, Francis, as he said, he's not Scorsese, Spielberg, you know, Polanski. Francis first is, you know, pull up a chair, and that's what started him in the theater. Before he even started movies, he was in the theater, and that's what he loved about the theater, is the being with people.
There was something, I'm glad you brought that up, because there was something in the book that I have been meaning to ask you since I read it about his work in the theater. I've been so fascinated by this because I've never seen anything about this before. You describe Francis having this process early in a film of composing two versions of a script. And tell me if I'm getting this wrong.
Totally right.
So here, you talk about this because you'll summarize your own work better than I will, but talk about this two versions of the script and this rehearsal process that he did with the actors, because I've never heard of this before, and I want to steal it.
I had only heard of it once, and that was... Who directed Born Yesterday? Cukor. Cukor did it, but that was a play.
This is why we don't do pub trivia together, because you'll just kill me every time. Yeah.
So Francis, when he did You're a Big Boy Now, his first movie, and Finian's Rainbow, he would have them rehearse it as a play, and he would write a totally separate script. He would write a play based on the script.
Story?
Based on the script, he would write a play. Now, I don't think, and then they would do, Fred Astaire did this on Finian's Rainbow. If you can imagine, at Warner Brothers, they performed Finian's Rainbow as a play.
With Fred Astaire.
With Fred Astaire. And I don't hear, I could not, nothing good came of this. But
it seems like something good came of this.
Well,
I mean,
nothing good creatively came of this. I don't think. I mean, we've seen Finian's Rainbow, but what it helped Francis. It's the world that he wants to be in, is perpetual rehearsal.
Did he do this with later films?
In his way, yeah. I mean, in fact, One from the Heart. The joy of making One from the Heart, or the nightmare, depending upon who you speak to, is endless rehearsal. The whole pre-visualization process, which is what he invented for One from the Heart, was a way to shoot the movie on, shoot the movie in photographs, shoot the movie in video, over and over and over again, to totally shoot the movie before film, so you know exactly what you're doing, like a sketch pad. And that was a way for him to prolong the rehearsal process. Now, he felt he was discovering the movie. Whether or not he did is up to you.
Do you think his actors felt that they were discovering something in
No.
that process? Interesting.
No. But, and I say that in a funny way, but the actors were annoyed by this for reasons I totally understand. But Francis was he was trying to figure out this technology. He wasn't there yet. He got better at it in The Outsiders and Rumblefish. So at One from the Heart, it was still, the actors were still puppets because he was still invested in this technology that was upstaging them.
So he was still kind of trying to do these endless rehearsal processes up through Outsiders and Rumblefish.
Yes, but he got better at letting the actor in as he got more used to the technology and emerged from his remote control digital vehicle, the Silverfish. This is a lot of information. I don't know if people are...
We can have a technical conversation about...
Is this cool? Yeah, all right.
Well,
Right,
because it seemed like that so much. I'm glad you mentioned the Silverfish, because it seemed as if, his childhood obsession that you described so vividly with bugging technology, with surveillance, which I don't need to talk about how that comes up in his work, seems to it's not just formative for him in terms of the conversation, but it's formative for him in terms of how he looks at filmmaking in general. As in, I'm going to put on this play and then spy on it.
Yeah.
And that's, like, there's this peeping Tom quality to his description of his role in that. Does that seem... Is that what you found?
Well, there's power in that, and Francis as a little boy didn't have any power. And he would fantasize as a boy of putting little... bugging his family. So he could then come in and say, I know what you were talking about. And that, for someone who's on the outside and doesn't have any power, that's a nice fantasy. And it can work against him when he hides behind it, as he did often, I think, in One from the Heart, is that he was remote from the actors. He was bugging them. And if he was right there, he might have had a better performance. But spying and surveillance technology, this is what the conversation is about. That's been with Francis again since he was a boy.
He seems to have, as we're talking about technology, he seems to have such a great eye for talent sort of around him. Yeah. I mean, sort of you tell these amazing stories of him discovering a young George Lucas, as well as discovering a young Walter Murch, who seems to be this total polymath iconoclast genius who Coppola had the good sense to just set in a building and say, can you completely reinvent how film sound works? And Murch said, yes. And then they did it. Talk to me about that.
Well, part of why Francis gets such great people is, A, he has great taste, obviously. I mean, yes. I mean, Francis has great taste. But also he lets people be themselves. He's a great improviser in that way. And he says, okay, go do it. Show me. And because of that, he's very attracted to amateurs. He loves the idea of the amateur because the amateur will find a new way to do it. You've never edited a movie before? You should edit this movie. This is literally the way Francis works. This is literally true of Walter Murch in The Conversation and Anne in Anne Gorseau in One from the Heart. What, you Francis Ford Coppola, you want me to do this? I have no credentials. Exactly. That's why George Lucas says to Francis, I can't write a script, you're writing a script. I've never held a camera before, here's a camera. And that's also part of the spiritual adventure of filmmaking. You're going to find a new part of yourself when you work with Francis. And it's the way he hired people at Zoetrope too. my friend Holland, she was looking for a job, and she went to Zoetrope, and they said, do you have any business? Have you worked in the film business before? She said, no, but I can make pastries. Great, you're coming. And it is exactly that spirit that makes innovation second nature. Exactly that. And you try to think, well, first of all, that's literally impossible in Hollywood, where unions keep you in your lane creatively. You can't, if you are a DP, if you can't go over here. That's somebody else's job. So the cross-fertilization cannot happen. And when you talk to Murch and Lucas about THX, it was Francis' Zoetrope movie, THX, it's all because they played in each other's lane, Murch was talking about sound design to Lucas in the screenwriting phase. What screenwriter is talking to the mixer? It's completely, you can see that on the screen, hear that on the screen. That's only Zoetrope.
It's amazing that they had the ability to kind of throw everyone together in that bouillabaisse in a way that sort of no one else could. I will say that certainly one gets the impression from the book that Francis was not a big fan of the Hollywood unions.
Right.
Right. He seemed to be rebelling against them at every turn.
Yes.
Kind of actively
You want me to
away.
pay? I can't pay. I'm trying to make a movie here. I can't pay these people. You want me to tell these people they can't hold a camera? We're in a little independent outfit. So that was Francis's view. Now, the other side to that is obviously, we know the other side to that. It's a legitimate other side to that. I should be paid more. So we're getting a lot of young people in Zoetrope, so you get a lot of young.
Yeah.
But with young also comes fearlessness and creativity, and that's who made Apocalypse.
Over many, many days from your description of... So let's talk about that for a bit, because your book takes what I found to be a very novel structural conceit. You jump around in time a lot, but you, in the first half, return to the making of Apocalypse, where in the second half you're sort of returning as sort of a present day with flashbacks to how we got there, to One from the Heart, and kind of contrasting those experiences. Talk to me about your experience of writing this book and where that structural conceit came from for you.
Because I wanted Francis to... I wanted to... I was in a nightmare.
Tell me about that.
I was in a nightmare finishing my book about the Chinatown. And so I started, it's kind of like, I turned the page and Francis was in a nightmare. At the beginning of Apocalypse Now, where his life was over. And so I walked into that, and that just naturally became the beginning of this book.
Because, it felt like a sort of experimental way of telling this story. And a way of sort of declaring, tell me if you intend something quite different, but I got this impression that you're declaring to a reader pretty early on, there are other books about Francis Ford Coppola. This is not going to be one of them. We're not starting with him being born and kind of going up through his life to the present day. We're telling a very specific story about these very specific moments in his life.
Well, yes, I didn't want to do cradle to grave because I also wanted him to go up the river and lose his mind, and during Apocalypse, and in losing his mind, go back and reflect on who he was and how he got into this mess.
What do you think your description of his process of making Apocalypse makes it sound as if that's the movie that really changed him and his process and his whole way of thinking about film. Do you think that's right?
Well, he was experimenting with this on The Rain People early on, and You're a Big Boy Now, living the movie. Apocalypse is the most extreme example of it. So that's why I wanted to go into detail about that.
Yeah. Tell me about the moment you first showed Francis pages from the book.
Do these people have any energy?
Where are we? Are we in LA? Are we in Marin?
We're in Napa.
Napa.
We're in Napa.
Like any story that starts, we're in Napa.
Yeah.
You have a bottle of wine.
We're in Napa. Jesus. Imagine that scene.
I am.
To get notes from Francis Coppola is hard enough. To get notes from Francis Coppola when you're writing about his life is terrible. And not because he was wrong, but because it's scary to sit across from someone who you so admire and who's so imposing and whose life you are holding in the form of your work, which is your life. And so and we don't know each other. To be thrown into this situation, which is so intimate, to be totally naked and saying to each other, you could lose a little weight, your nose is a little big over here. Well, that's really what we're doing, sitting at each other, sitting naked and trying not to hurt each other, getting hurt, and understanding why we're hurting each other, because we're pissed off at the other one, but also we know we need the other one to get through this together. So we're holding hands, but the hands are sweaty, and we keep slipping, and we keep grasping on, and then yelling at why did you let go of my hand, like that for days. And
had he read the text in advance of these meetings?
Yes.
And had he sort of red penned them or something like that?
He red penned them, and we went through note by note. And the notes were, some of them about profound things. Some of them, I didn't make $500 on that job. I made $400 on that job. But it's his life. I mean, I can't imagine. It's his life. He doesn't know me. And I walk in there and I say, I love you. Love me.
And it would appear that he did.
I don't know, and that's my own work. That's my own work. But I wanted him to love me, and that was dangerous and real. And I don't know if he does. I know that he likes the book. I really do think that he likes the book. He ordered 100 copies. Are people still in it?
Well, actually, that seems like it might be a nice transition to the next phase of this conversation, which is the Q&A portion. So I think we have a microphone. Great. While we get a microphone.
Graham, thank you.
This is my
It's
pleasure.
so emotional for me talking about it.
Did you sign the books, the 100 books?
No.
Do you
I
think
would, though.
he's going to sign the 100 books?
He's
'Cause
allowed to.
Yeah,
He's
probably
allowed
should.
to. He's allowed to.
Well, let's see who.
I was so scared to meet him. Can you imagine?
No,
That never stopped being scary, by the way.
So did you
never
keep going
stopped
up there
being
to
scary.
get more notes
Yes,
on text?
yes.
So you do another draft and send them to
Yes.
him, like it was a screenplay or something, and Francis is.
Yes.
What do you? So I know we're gonna do questions. What does? Did he have a red pen? Like, did he actually mark up line
Yes.
by line?
Yes.
Literally
He
marked it up line by line with a red pen.
He didn't mark it up line by line. He typed up all of his notes. He numbered all of his notes, which was 20 pages worth of notes. And then we discussed every note for days. Every note. It wasn't a line edit. It was you say here on page 1, line 1, that I fought with my father. That's not really true. My father and I, we got along very well. He wasn't an easy man, and I remember it being difficult. But, I always really liked my father when he wasn't being mean to me and yelling at me. Okay, Francis, so line 1, you're saying I got it right? I'm just saying you should look at that very carefully, well, do you want to read it again after I'm done? No, 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 it's completely up to you, but you should send it to me when you rewrite it, and I'll take a look and see what I think. But I respect your process, and, and he was amazing. I'm being silly, but I mean it's complicated. It's so complicated. He really wanted to let me do my own thing. He really said, "Go do your own thing," and he also wanted it to be close to his memory and allowed me, to the best of his comfort level, to deviate from his memory when I believed that he was misremembering. Oof.
This story makes me love both of you even more, if such a thing is possible. I mean, really, a tremendous credit to you both.
Okay, we do have time for a few questions. Please stand, and I'll bring you does anybody have a question? Okay.
When you were talking about having Walter Murch with George Lucas, I was thinking about Carol Ballard talking about making, and how he'd never done anything, and how the first part when they were shooting in Canada was a nightmare because it was a crew and they didn't think he knew what he was doing, but when they went off to do the island footage, it just opened up and people trusted him. Do you have any other examples of similar things?
Oh, so many examples. I mean, for good and for bad. The film, what is your name? Dan. The film Dan's talking about is The Black Stallion, which is, yes, by Carol Ballard. It's a great movie. And the way this got made is a zoetrope way, which is, what script? Go to Sardinia, shoot. They shot for, I don't remember, but it was months. It was months in Sardinia with the horse and the boy. And Carol Ballard just following the horse and the boy around. And could you imagine? And Francis has to speak to United Artists. Francis is accountable as he's making Apocalypse and losing his mind. He is accountable for The Black Stallion to United Artists. What an amazing guy Francis is. Do I have examples of that? I mean, so many. That's the way that he let his people make movies. It's a way we wish we could all make movies. We wish we could all work. Somebody saying, keep going. There's no rush. Keep going. Don't worry about where the money. I'll handle it.
Anybody else? Okay.
Howdy. Thanks, you guys,
Hi.
for doing this. It's really quite interesting. Did you ever talk to him about any of his casting choices and how he made those? For instance, I had heard at some point that Marlon Brando was going to be the lead in the conversation, but didn't want to do it or something, and then Gene Hackman comes in. Any of those? Do you have any stories about that kind of thing?
I didn't go into a lot of that. The question is about Francis and casting. I didn't go into a lot of that with him. So much of that has been written. He did write Conversation for Brando, but not because he had a relationship with Brando, because when he wrote Conversation, he was so young, he dreamed of Brando. He didn't get Brando. But stories about casting, let me just flip through my I mean, a lot of them, Francis, it's interesting about Francis and actors. He'll go to the mat for an actor in a way he won't go to the mat even for himself. Even for his own script, Francis will say, maybe you got a point. Maybe I should. But when it's an actor, he knows. And the story of Godfather's full of those. Pacino, most famously, going up against Evans for Pacino, who, Panic in Needle Park, and that was it, I don't even know if Panic in Needle Park has come out yet. But Francis, coming from the theater, really loves actors, and that's where a lot of his conviction is.
Hi there, thank you for being here. I sneaked into your book a little bit before your presentation, and you're masterful. My question is about really what drives Francis Ford Coppola, because I've seen all of his movies, every single one, and never knew about him as a person and didn't know that it was reflective in his art.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Francis is always trying to jump off the ledge of himself when he works. He's always going to what scares him and living that, whether it's the road trip of the Rain People, a mother leaving her husband and essentially baby, or The Conversation, which is the deepest loneliness in Francis, Apocalypse, or One from the Heart, which is the love story that he could never figure out. He's always working on himself. That's part of why Francis is so hard to write about, because he's very disorganized as an artist in that way. You cannot say, there's no such thing as Coppola-esque, you know? We know Hitchcock, what Hitchcock looks like, and Spielberg and Scorsese. We know these people, what they look like. Francis keeps changing. And that is a conscious part of his process, of always being an amateur. Back to amateur. He's always an amateur to himself.
Hi, you're so passionate about your book, and I can't wait to read it, but is this going to change you and your process of writing as you go forward to your next project and the way he's influenced you?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. It's made it much easier for me and to not have the answer starting out.
What?
And I hope it makes it easier for everyone. Not having the answer as writers, directors, whatever, actors, to allow yourself the luxury of pre-production, whatever that means, however long that takes, and forgive yourself the drafts and the blank page and not knowing. And Francis did and does. That I'll take with me. That's made me a lot happier and more peaceful, yeah.
Our last question.
Sammy Wasson.
Jack,
I got a two-parter. Can you
take
handle
your
it?
time. These people will wait.
There-
They paid already.
I love you.
I love you.
So I'm curious, did you speak to Francis about the state of the entertainment business today? And does the legendary enthusiasm and spirit of collaboration extend to a beacon of hope? I know where you stand on the beacon of hope.
Yeah, you do.
And then the second question is, how's the food at Francis's house?
Great question. Which one should I take first? I'll take. Actually, they're both happy. You know, I tried to turn Francis into a cynic, and we really went back and forth on the question of the food's fabulous. By the way, the food is so good, and it's so fun being there, and he just sits. You sit by I sat by the pool, and out comes the food. It just comes out. He doesn't even look at it, and he's just talking to you, and he'll just reach over, and he'll dig in, and he'll eat, and he'll say, you want that? Do you want to eat this? And do you want wine? Well, anyway, but back to Goethe. If you ever read Elective Affinities, you'll see that when I was working on Apocalypse, I was really reading a lot about that. You know, my grandson is so smart. And the grandson's sitting over there with like a piece of tuna fish falling out of his mouth. It was beautiful, and the food was beautiful, and to hang out with him was exactly what you would hope it would be. And on the issue of hope for the future, yes, Francis is the most optimistic person. He believes that human beings are good, and here's why he believes it. I'm not sure where I stand on this, but but a lot's riding on tonight. I said, Francis, how do you know people are good? He said, because we'd all be dead if people weren't good. Now, I'm not a deep thinker in that way, so I don't know if that makes sense to you. Maybe that's ludicrous, but to me, I thought it was great. I thought, wow. He said, we must want to help each other. We must really want to help each other if we're all still here. I thought, okay, I'll follow you. He thinks the cinema will live forever, and his regret is that he lost the gamble of One from the Heart, and so was less a part in making sure that the cinema would be in great shape for the next generation. If there was one thing he insisted in the book, he did not have authority. We had an unusual relationship in that way. But he said, you must put in the book that my biggest regret is that I did not leave film better than when I found it. It's his big regret. Yeah, yeah. Food was great. That's it.